Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to another episode of Canada Today on Muslim Network TV. This is your host, Taha Ghayur. Today we are going to be talking about a legend of Canadian Muslim community, an iconic community builder and activist whom Canada has recently lost, unfortunately. And we're talking about a person whom many of us know, and maybe some of the younger folks, may not have known or heard about her because of her very humble nature. And we're talking about none other than Khadija Haffajee, Sister Khadija Haffajee from Ottawa, from nation's capital in Canada. She will always be described as a giant pillar of community building, a renowned Canadian Muslim. She was known as a determined activist for the rights of Muslim women, playing many roles. She was also a versatile educator and an incredible mentor to many young people. Indeed, both Muslims and our neighbors and the wider community have not stopped grieving her passing a few weeks back, almost a month ago. On today's special tribute to Khadija Haffajee on Canada Today, we are here to celebrate her life, and to do that, we have two wonderful individuals who have spent time with her, were mentored by her, and we will be introducing them in just a moment. Before we do that, I want to just quickly share with you a few highlights about our dear sister, Sister Khadija Haffajee. She was originally from South Africa, and she lived in Ottawa for almost 5 decades. And Khadija also held many affiliations across several not-for-profit organizations across Canada. Just to name a few, she was a valued member of board of directors for the Council on American Relations of Canada, or CARE Canada as it was known before, and now known as NCCM, National Council of Canadian Muslims. She was also the National Board of Religions for Peace Canada, among many other affiliations. In 1997, she was the first female elected to the Shura of Islamic Society of North America, or ISNA. Sister Khadija also pursued humanitarian goals. She also worked with Afghan refugees in Pakistan during the Soviet War, and she was also sent on a lecture tour to Malawi and Zimbabwe in 1985. Today we will be, as I mentioned, speaking with two female leaders, activists as well in our community, and educators who will shed some light on the life and legacy of Sister Khadija. And we'll start off with Baraa Arar in Ottawa, who is an Ottawa-based academic, creative writer, spoken word artist, and educator and researcher who believes in storytelling. She's passionate about exploring research that focuses on the intersection of gender, empire, and visual culture. And in 2018, she achieved the Carleton Provost Scholar Award for community engagement, immersive learning, and her dedication to research. Sister Baraa joins us with a master's degree in history, and her writing has appeared in this magazine, CBC, and Global Mail. So welcome, Baraa, to this show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. And Dr. Aisha Sherazi, who is our next guest, is a writer, educator, and a spiritual care worker, and a community volunteer. Born and raised in the UK, she occasionally writes editorials in various newspapers and works as a spiritual counselor for teenagers and teachers. Working as a high school teacher, Dr. Aisha conducts workshops across the city on dangers of stereotyping. Dr. Aisha has also helped represent the Muslim community of Ottawa for the Ottawa Police Services, and joining us with a PhD in environmental toxicology. She's also on the board of Islamic Social Services Association of Canada. She first came to know our sister Khadija Haffajee through her beautiful halaqa gatherings, and she'll talk more about it as we go along. So thank you, Sister Aisha, for joining us on this show today.
Thank you for having me.
And I can see you are sitting in a classroom, so thank you for taking out your time to pay tribute to such an incredible human being that we're going to be talking more about in a moment. So, Sister Aisha, we want to start off with you. We want to talk a little bit and understand who Sister Khadija was. Yes, I did probably not much of a justice here talking about a few of her accomplishments, but there are many people who may not be aware only because she was not, one of those individuals who are constantly taking selfies, posting her achievements, showing to the world how great of a leader she is or was. And she was very humble, and despite so many accolades and of course achievement and awards. So tell us who was Sister Khadija? Who is Khadija Haffajee, and what did she do?
I think in one word, I would describe her as a trailblazer. She moved to Canada just over 50 years ago, and was, very unique for her time. Her husband, Mazhar Hassan, describes her as very courageous. And I think that that's very true, because she had a bravery about her. And at a time where females were limited, sisters were limited in what they did and how they went about it. Her strength of character shone through, and she gained the respect in spaces that traditionally females did not gain that respect. So, she came to take on not just those leadership roles within female spaces, but also within male spaces, and kind of became one of the brothers, so to speak. And I think that's what makes her sort of stand out. She's unique in that respect.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And why don't we start off with both of you talking about your first time interaction with Sister Khadija? I mean, how did you get to know her? What was that first interaction with her? And maybe we'll start off with Baraa first.
I always find it difficult to answer the question when I first met someone. Dr. Aisha will know that Ottawa Muslim community is pretty tight knit, and so maybe I met her before this instance. So I can't. That's a disclaimer. I can't be 100% sure this was our first meeting. But from what I recall, my first meeting was I was auditioning for a show called The Expressions of Muslim Women, and this is a show that's still hosted in Ottawa by a team of women artists, and it's by women and for women, and it kind of celebrates all sorts of artistic expressions, so visual art, storytelling, music, skits, and any other kind of creative endeavor of Muslim women. And it's been going on for many years, and one of the founders and champions of it was Sister Khadija. So I think the first time I remember meeting her must have been when I was 14 or so, and we were going to her. My mom and I were on our way to her house. We went to her house where the auditions were being held. So that's the first kind of solid memory I have of her, and that's one of the main contexts where I got to know Sister Khadija through the years as well.
That's beautiful, and we'll talk a little bit more about this endeavor, creative endeavor in particular, which is always very close to my heart. But I mean, knowing that a person of her age, mashallah, championing something like this, and not just for youth, but actually that involves creativity, and innovation and how we express ourselves is really powerful. So thank you for sharing that. So Dr. Aisha, what do you have to say about how you came to know her?
Well, I met her. I moved to Ottawa in 2000 from the UK, and really didn't come. I came because my husband was working here and we wanted to give it a try. But I had no connection with the community. When you're new, you've moved somewhere. I consider it a huge blessing. She's one of the first people that I got to know through a friend who took me to her halaqah. And I had no idea. I mean, I was just tagging along. I had no idea who I was meeting, but really, I met a friend for life. And her halaqah was very unique. You mentioned her halaqah. It was very unique because she would craft her classes. You know, she would take themes and topics, and she would get us to open the Quran and ask us, what is Allah trying to say to you in that verse, you know, or in this passage? What is it? And so, subhanallah, you know, having that, just making the Quran accessible in that manner was very different. And it spoke to who she was, because she really didn't want sheep. She couldn't stand that mentality. She wanted you to think and act, and you know, she couldn't stand laziness. You know, think about this. What is Allah trying to say to you? Why, you know, why does he want you to connect? Why does he want to connect with you in this way? And so, quite revolutionary. And I don't know if many people do it that way, but she certainly did. And it's an amazing experience. And then, you know, her attendees over the years are so diverse. So she's got people who are very integrated into the community, but she also had, you know, people who were housewives who were at home with their kids, and this was an outlet for them to come and share their thoughts. And being asked, you know, what do you think about this, is great, because otherwise people can be very isolated. So it was really amazing. And so through that, I got to know her more and worked with her in some projects. And what an incredible lady, subhanallah.
Wow, that's
May Allah
amazing.
bless her. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and so one of the things that you know, we hear a lot, especially after her passing, but even before, a lot of people have talked about her power to empower others, and especially young people. She was really amazing at impacting young people the way she did. And I mean, you know, even there have been interviews on CBC, there have been other places where her students and young people have been talking about how she empowered young people, and especially more specifically how it helped them build their identity. So I think, Dr. Aisha, you just touched a little bit on this, what she did, which was so powerful. I want to hear from Baraa, who is of, you know, next generation, and this is the part that I found very interesting, that her impact is so multi-generational. The fact that you have people who, you know, she was a leader and a pioneering leader of 70s. You, Dr. Aisha, have been involved for the past 2 decades. She's been there for 50 years,
Yeah.
you know, good 40 years she had been involved. And now you have, mashallah, new generation of students, Baraa, who happen to be apparently your student as well, Dr. Aisha. So, so I want to hear from Baraa. What you know, what was so interesting about her, the way she you know, empowered young people, and more specifically in terms of developing their Canadian Muslim identity?
I think that it's easy, or I don't want to say it's easy, but I think that when you are, you know, second, third generation, and now, you know, there's people younger than me, that Muslims born here, it's not an easy task to think, to understand where you fit in, whether that's in mainstream society, whether that's in certain spaces. And I think one of the reasons that is because we don't necessarily, as Canadian Muslims, have clear histories and roots. And even if we do, they're not very well documented. They're not very much celebrated. Partly, I think that's our kind of own shortcoming, but also because we are still kind of a minority within general culture. And so we might not be able to situate ourselves in relation to that. So seeing someone like Sister Khadija, who has been, like Dr. Aisha said, a trailblazer and really kind of an icon and an anchor in the community, I think even without her saying anything, just the sense of, yeah, we've been here, we've been, as in Canadian Muslims, we've been engaged and present and interested and we've been advocates, etc. So the sense of understanding that you're not the first to do this, insofar as you're not the first Canadian Muslim activist, you're not the first to challenge assumptions, you're not the first to battle Islamophobia, etc. I think the knowledge that you are part of something, and that something was, started by someone like Sister Khadija and others in her generation, is very comforting. We talk a lot about the kind of burden of being first, like first Muslim women to, etc., to blank, right? And sometimes that's great, but other times that's really challenging to take on that role. And so when you're able to see that there is a long history behind you. Maybe it's not hundreds of years, but it's 5-6 decades of women who have been working tirelessly on many of the same projects and issues that you are. So I think that's definitely one part of it. And I think that is very important in identity building, because you are able to sort of attach yourself to all these different communities and projects that are bigger than you, and that creates meaning. So it's not just you as a standalone person, an individual, and you're sort of lost and absorbed by a larger culture, maybe a larger culture that doesn't identify with the same things that you do and the same values. So I think that's one way that others, and I think the other way is that someone like Sister Khadija, till the very end of her life, so there was no stop, there was no like, okay, I'm 60, it's time to retire kind of thing, right? These things aren't like that, and she wasn't like that. And so she was always creating spaces. So we talk a lot about our spaces for Muslims. So we talk a lot about, okay, well, we might not feel comfortable in X scenario or X space. Well, what do you do? What's the alternative? And I think that she's definitely a leader in like creating those alternatives, whether it's the halaqah, whether it's later on being part of developing expressions of Muslim women. These are things that offer alternatives or offer safe spaces for Muslims, and especially Canadian and especially young Muslim women, to have those identity building moments. So I would say that those would be kind of the two ways that she's contributed to empowering young Muslims and helping sort of support their growing identities, because other folks maybe from more represented communities might not need that, right? Like whatever is readily accessible is a place where they can feel safe and they can feel comfortable. Whereas I think it takes a little bit more work for minority communities to do that, and she did that work.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. So Dr. Aisha, I wanted to build on what Baraa just talked about. She just talked about one of the things that she did, and a lot of people talk about, is really she created those spaces that were not there, and especially for youth, for young women and Muslim sisters. I wanted to ask you, I mean, what are your thoughts on the impact of Khadija Haffajee's multi-generational impact? I mean, based on what you have seen before you came, of course, while you were there, of course, and now you see newer generation. I mean, you are all products, partly products, of course, of her work and labor. So I wanted to hear your thoughts on what you have seen.
I think one of the threads that I can really connect between everything that she did was that she was an incredible listener. And I think when you're a good listener, you invite people to share a part of themselves. And she had energy. And, you know, when she had that energy, she passed it on to people through that ability to listen, such that then they felt inspired to go on and act upon those thoughts and ideas that they had. And where she felt that people were not doing something, then she would intervene and kind of create things. But I think for the most part, her real power came from being a fabulous listener and being able to say, you know, that sounds amazing, and just empowering in that sense. So that was one thing. And her incredible energy levels, you know, just because, like I mentioned it before, she just couldn't stand it when people complained but didn't do anything, you know. Wow. And so that put those elements together, and, you know, you create amazing drive and energy and push to get things done.
Wow. That's amazing, mashallah. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, again, that only something people like you who have worked with her can really share, because, you know, you see great achievements of hers, and I myself have been inspired by so much amazing work she has done. But, you know, people like you who have been her students, who have worked with her, are able to share these kinds of insights that many of us did not, of course, have that opportunity. So one of the things that a lot of people talk about her when it comes to her legacy, and again, you know, why she was successful, was the fact that she was able to bring people together. I would like to hear from both of you, based on what you have seen over the last couple of decades of her work. What was so special about the way she brought people together, and what kinds of people? Because my understanding, she has worked in all sorts of spheres. She's worked in, of course, in the Muslim community. She was in the wider community. She was part of the board of Children Aid Society. I mean, she was doing so many other things, and, you know, interfaith communities out there. So what kinds of people was she able to bring together, based on what you have seen over the past couple of decades? And we'll start maybe with Baraa.
I think I can speak to the kind of community that was created around expressions of Muslim women, and that is in many initiatives and many Muslim initiatives, unfortunately, there is a tendency that there is some sort of one ethnic group or one national group dominates. So whether it's Arabs or South Asians or Middle Eastern Muslims, one group sort of dominates or is overrepresented. And I think one of the things that's very notable about working with the group at Expression of Muslim Women, at one point led by Sister Khadija, is that that's not the case. Because of her, the variety of, I guess the breadth of projects that she was involved with over long periods of time. And like Dr. Aisha said, her openness and willingness to listen, that I think attracted many kinds of people to her. So she was there was no sense of being insular, being protective of one, specific ethnic background or one specific way to be Muslim. And I think that's I think when maybe we're afraid or afraid of losing our identity, ourself, our Muslimness, we start to do that. But that's definitely not the environment that she created, and most definitely probably not the kind of environment she wanted to see. So I think that's one thing that, and I think in order to do that, you have to be a very open-minded, and you have to be ready to challenge your own assumptions. You have to be ready to challenge your own comfort level, and so I think that's one thing that, in her gatherings, there were Black Muslims, there were Arab Muslims, there were Pakistani Muslims, there were white Muslims. There wasn't one specific way to be, young, and especially the generational thing as well. Young women were sitting around more middle-aged women, elderly women. So there's this sense of community that's created there, that's, I think, tied together with and fostered by her openness, that especially, when, I mean, assume, like, this is an assumption, but I think it's fair to say that when you come to Canada, at the time that she did, it would be easy to say, no, I'm going to stick to only people who look exactly like me. But that's not the case, and that wasn't the case, and she continued to foster that kind of mentality.
Interesting. Dr. Aisha, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think she was 100% non-judgmental. And I think when you are not judgmental in your nature, you are accepting of everyone, be it someone from a different faith, be it someone from no faith. She didn't judge you based on who you were or what you looked like or how you practiced. All of those things foster a sense of welcome. And, she could be tough. Like, she wasn't, I don't want us to describe her as a pussycat that was just like this auntie that, she was not like that. She was very, very tough. But in a way that it pushed people to bring out the best of themselves, no matter where you were at. And it's very important and unique in that, that was why her whole ethos was bringing people together. She had a gathering of numerous people brought together when she was celebrating the Halakha girls, sort of, that she had at that time. Said, no, we should do something to commemorate this milestone of being in Canada for 50 years, right? It's an achievement. It's a big thing. Let's celebrate your journey. And so if you had seen the diversity in that room, it was phenomenal. And until now, I mean, I was asked to write her obituary, and I did that. And I'm still getting people who are contacting me from her book club who are saying, we'd like to take this further and we'd like to share other things. I think she gave people the sense that they were the only people in the room. She really made you feel like you were. It's incredible now. Like, I thought I was so special to her. And, I visited with her, and we were very close with her as a family. Like, my extended family are also very close with her. But I realize now that lots of people had that feeling, and she was so smart about navigating that, because she didn't mix people together. Like, she kept you as special, for that reason, so that it wouldn't take away from what she had given you and what you had given her. Right. Wow. And it takes a unique person to make you feel like you're really important, when in the grand scheme of things, you're one of many. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. I mean, that's such a prophetic example. Actually, you talked about listening and giving people attention. I mean, this is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Something you both mentioned, which was her non-judgmental attitude, which helped her push actually into areas that were not necessarily comfortable, but led her to new horizons. And it reminded me of something about her early life, which I came across on the Muslim Link interview that she gave a few years ago, and she talks about how it's quite ironic that she actually did not like Muslims to begin with. When she came to Canada in the 60s, she, based on some of her own personal experiences back in South Africa and even initial experiences here, she didn't want to identify with anybody Muslim. She didn't want to, even come to know anybody. Only when she went back once back home, somebody said, your mom would wish, one of her wishes that you get to know more Muslims and stick around with Muslim community. So when she comes back, that's when she started exploring a bit more, but she still had a lot of hesitation. And it's interesting, she talks about her first experience going to a Muslim family, Pakistani Muslim family back in 60s to their home, or early 70s to their home. And she said like that just completely changed her life after that. And it's amazing how from there on, she becomes not only a participant, a great participant in the community, but she becomes a leader and a pioneering leader. So I wanted to ask you, Dr. Aisha, I know you've been involved with the leadership roles in the community in Ottawa. And there's so many amazing leaders out there across Canada. I'm talking specifically female leaders. What if you were if you were here in 70s or 80s or 90s, and even now, what did it mean to have somebody like her to be in positions of power the way she did, and she carved out her space, whether it's being on the CARICAN board or on the board of course, ISNA or anything else? I mean, for you personally, and for many other female leaders out there, what does that mean?
I think for me personally, she has been instrumental in helping me navigate some of the difficulties that are involved in community work. And those of us that are involved in community work know those challenges, right? Sometimes, for example, you'll get, it's unfortunate, but it's true. We get those, the rumor mill, and I heard this, and we sometimes forget very, very quickly how important it is to walk that fine line of, being in a position of responsibility and really wearing that responsibility well. And I can remember going to her and saying to her, when I was in a leadership position, that people talk to me about all sorts of different things, and it becomes very challenging. How do I navigate these conversations in such a way? She said to me, Aisha, you've got to be so strict and say, I don't want to hear about it. Mm. And it was one of the best pieces of advice that she could have given me, because, you can be open and caring and warm and invite people to talk to you about things, but you've got to be responsible about how you deal with that information. And is it necessary for me to hear it? If it is necessary, how do I act upon it? But if it's not necessary, then stop. And I think that was such great advice. And it speaks to her character. She was very, very fiercely humble, like to a point where it was crazy, because she literally had done so much. She was somebody that could have spoken on and on about her achievements. And yet I doubt there's any one person that actually knows the extent to all the things that she did and was involved in, because you wouldn't be able to capture that if you tried. And that's because of her humility. And you have to have that in a leadership position, because it doesn't benefit you to be, she fundamentally embodied the idea that it's a service to Allah, right? Like that's at the core of what we're doing. And if this is about you, then you need to go and deal with that and get rid of that, because this is not about you. And it was never about her. And she would be cringing us even having this conversation, or she would laugh because she would know, what that we would know what she would feel about it. But that's why there's no big collection of everything, because I will tell you, even the collection of everything is a fraction.
Yeah, subhanAllah. May Allah accept all the great work she has done, things that we know about her and things we don't know about her. Only God knows her impact, and may that be a source of perpetual charity for her and for the generations to come, inshallah. I wanted to also just touch very quickly upon her amazing work, especially back in 70s, 80s, and 90s, around this sort of global perspective on Muslim women, and her actually traveling to different countries, giving lectures, whether it's at a UN event in China, or various interfaith type of initiatives like World Conference on Religion and Peace in Jordan, or going to different places like Afghanistan and Malawi, to basically talk about women's issues and their challenges. So I wanted to ask you, Baraa, I know you weren't probably even there at the time witnessing her work, but I wanted to know, based on your conversations and based on what you knew about her, why was it so important for her to be doing this kind of work? I mean, she was already so involved and so busy with the work in Ottawa and in Canada, and she was involved with several initiatives right here. And then, she had, of course, a very prominent position with ISNA for several years, almost 10 years in the Shura of ISNA, which is continental. So why was it so important for her to be traveling around and doing this kind of work?
I think, I think I can speak. I don't want to speak on her intentions or her motivations, but I think I can speak knowing how often it is very frustrating to be doing community work and to be coming up against the same hurdles and barriers. I think there comes a time in a lot of in the kind of career of many leaders or activists where you start to think this possibly can't only be happening to us, right? This must be more than just a local issue or concern, and there must be remedies or solutions that are global rather than local or uniquely local. And so I think that that's part of that. There is obviously a lot, and it's demonstrated by her for her CV, for lack of a better term. But at one point, I think there is kind of this realization that that your local work and your local concerns and local issues, especially facing women, actually extend beyond your local community, extend beyond Ottawa and Canada and North America. And that yes, there's cultural contexts and geographies and political contexts that are different, but I mean, even historically speaking, a lot of the issues that women face have been very similar. And so a lot of women's movements have found solidarity across countries, across nations, continents, for that very reason. And so I think that kind of harboring the sense of a global movement, having a global perspective, was probably very beneficial for her and many people probably learned from her, and she also learned from other people. And I think that is one of the reasons that kind of keeping this is obviously a very common term, but the kind of think global, act local, and I think that's a very telling example. Is a lot of her projects were based in the local community, but she also is not disregarding the broader contexts that have impact on what the local community faces, right?
Yeah. Thank you. Dr. Aisha, I wanted to, as we come to conclusion, I have a few questions to ask both of you. And one question I wanted to ask you, knowing her for about 2 decades that you knew her, what drove her to continue doing all the incredible things and services that she was providing? I mean, you mentioned something about, of course, her and purity of her intention, which is so critical, and probably that is number one thing. But what other motivations, what are the things that inspired her to keep doing what she's doing with the work of women's empowerment and women giving spaces and creating spaces and bringing community together and all the incredible things that she has achieved all these years?
I think, frankly speaking, those were the things that she was passionate about. Bringing people together was something that was a passion for her. And so she always looked to try and, initiate those projects and ideas that would achieve that. And even traveling overseas, she was an avid traveler. So even on a personal level, she, there's very few places in the globe that she has not visited. But I think she also recognized that it's a privilege not to have young children. She raised, has raised numerous kids over the years through one way or another and mentored so many of us. But I think she viewed that as, something that she could utilize and seize and give her time to connecting with others and helping others connect with each other. And that was a passion for her. So, yeah, I would say that that's what drove her. If you have that as your underlying passion, then, eventually that's you're always going to fall back on that in the end.
Amazing. So I wanted to ask both of you, what do you miss about Sister Khadija Haffajee? I mean, if there were top 3 things, let's say, or more, start with Baraa, I mean, that you really missed about her, and you're already missing about her, of course, now that she's no longer here with us. What would those be?
I think, so I know you mentioned that I was Ottawa-based, but I am not. I'm in Toronto. And since I've moved to Toronto, one of the things that I recognized very sharply is how tightly I guess my involvement with the Muslim community in Ottawa, and how growing up in such a community, attending the Islamic school for many years, made all those connections, and especially towards the kind of end of my time in Ottawa, working or not working, kind of being part of expressions of Muslim women and other projects of that sort, is those spaces that are comfortable and safe to be a young Muslim woman and to express yourself and to be told by, and to be in a way validated by women like Sister Khadija, who have been around doing this work for many years. And once you don't have that anymore, not to say that Toronto doesn't have that, I just don't have the same relationships here, you really miss it. And I think that's kind of the void that she will keep, that those spaces will, I'm sure they will continue to evolve and look different ways, especially now with COVID restrictions. I'm sure they look different. But I think that's the one thing, kind of those, even the physical spaces of being like her home, are surrounded by people that you otherwise may not meet and interact with. And I think that is something that many of us may take for granted if we grew up in those environments, and then you'll feel the very kind of the loss once that's gone.
Thank you for sharing that. Sister Aisha.
I think I will miss my friend. I will miss her. I will miss her counsel. I will miss calling her and having her listen to me. you know, and I will miss all that really good, wise advice, the non-judgmental place that I had to go to. You know, I will miss those things dearly. And I will miss laughing with her about so many things. She always had so many stories to tell, even during COVID times where you're stuck at home. She always had something to say. She was always in touch with people. And, you know, we had such a good chuckle together over so many different things. I will miss those things dearly. You know, subhanallah.
Thank you. I know it's hard to share such sentiments, and I just wanted to hear this because, again, a lot of people don't know about all the amazing things she has done, and those people like you who had the privilege and honor, of course, of being in her company. And there's so many, of course, out there who have some beautiful stories to share. I think this is very important. So thank you for your courage at sharing this. I wanted to also ask you a couple more questions about her legacy, and you know, again, because she was not a person who cared about her, you know, so much about her reputation and legacy and name and fame. But if she was, if she were to be asked, you know, what do you think she would have told us to continue after she moves on? And maybe she has told people certain things that she would love people to carry on her legacy in some way. So what are some of the things that you think she would want, you know, our community to sort of take the torch and start running with it based on the kind of work she has done and build on it? So Sister Aisha, you have anything to share in that regard?
I think her first and foremost request, actually, that she had of all of us was for us to make dua for her. So I religiously do that because she said very publicly in that gathering that we had that we are a part of her sadqa jariyah. And she said that, you know, it wasn't all the things that she had done. It was just that she had connected with us, and that was her request. She had one request. You know, she did not say, I want you to carry on doing this and carry on doing that. It was never about her. And she said that you are my sadqa jariyah and I want you to pray for me. So, you know, that was her request from herself. I know that. I was there when I heard that. But I think we as you know, people that were connected to her, and even people who were not connected to her, we have a duty to carry on the work that she did and the manner in which she did it, right? With impeccable character, you know, following the Quran and the Sunnah, and really establishing those things that we feel are a need in the community, and doing that not through, you know, any other way other than just bringing people together, listening to them. Youth, like, she often spent time with youth for that reason, because she loved their energy. She loved their interest in making changes. And, you know, she understood that intrinsically. She was young at heart and remained young at heart right to the end of her life. And so I think, you know, our duty, her legacy, we can continue that by, you know, modeling that in our futures.
Excellent. Thank you very much. This is a good segue into what I was going to ask Baraa about at the end, and that is knowing her style of mentorship and all the things you guys have talked about. In 1 minute, what would be, let's say, the top 3 things you would want to you would want basically young the new mentors out there, new leaders out there, to have you know, inculcate in their lives and in their work for youth empowerment? Like, what would be the 3 things you learned from her that you think we as youth mentors and leaders out there, even as parents, should continue doing the way she did, basically?
I think first and foremost, and this is, I guess, also a personal piece of advice, but something that Sister Khadija demonstrated, is that if you see that there's something wrong or missing or not there, do it. And I will say, you know, from experience, you will have resistance from established institutions, mostly Muslim institutions, unfortunately. But if you believe in it, and you will find people who will support you, whether practically, financially, even. And so go ahead and do it, and you will find support. Something like Expressions of Muslim Women, lots of people will continue to say, oh, women singing is haram, women doing this is haram, not acceptable, forbidden. But it's done so well, done very successfully, and done on Muslim women's terms. And I think, so I guess that would be the first thing, and connected to it is to have the courage to be kind of unapologetically Muslim. It's very easy to want to hide, want to strip certain things away from yourself, whether visibly or internally, so that you feel that you may fit in. But there's a long history of Muslims in Canada that we're actually discovering more and more. Sister Khadija Haffajee is definitely one of those figures. So, you know, don't be sort of embarrassed or, and it's hard to not be scared, but try not to be scared of that. And I think that one way you can do that is surrounding yourself by other Muslims that think like you. But yeah, just allow yourself, have the courage to be, you know, loudly and bravely Muslim.
Okay, great. I have one last question for Dr. Aisha, and that is what I find really exciting and amazing is the fact that you, the Ottawa Muslim community, and your team and community there did a wonderful job of basically celebrating her life towards the end, and you did a nice gala, and it's a great milestone. And I'm seeing some of that happen with some of our other imams and sheikhs and leaders, pioneers who've done an amazing job over the last few years, last few decades here. But there's so many that who sadly leave unnoticed, and sometimes nobody celebrates anything. And it's really sadly, it's only after they pass away that we are, you know, we're talking about, okay, what should be done or should not have been done, and how great he was or she was. All that is great, but it's sad that most of the time we don't celebrate incredible people whom we're losing very quickly. The last few years, we have last year or so, just look at how many great leaders like Dr. Fuad Shaheen, and of course now Khadija Haffajee, and there's so many who are of course now seniors, and they have so much we can learn from still, are still there, but we are not doing enough to celebrate their lives while they're alive. So I wanted to ask you specifically in 1 minute that we have left, what are some of the things you think we should do as Canadian Muslims to ensure that we celebrate and continue to celebrate the lives of our pioneers who, while they're still alive?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I know as someone who is in a leadership position, I know that I myself, like, I don't like getting nominated for awards. I run from things like that. I'm very uncomfortable because it's not about that to me. But when you say those things, I know what you mean is that we are a part of Canadian fabric, and there are individuals, mashallah, that are making a real difference to the fabric of Canada, right? And so while we want those efforts to be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we want those efforts to be rewarded in al-akhirah, that's the main intention of those individuals. All of them probably have that one thing in common, that they don't want to be celebrated.
Yes.
You know, even when we had the gathering for Auntie, it was mostly because it was to celebrate the journey of 50 years of her coming to Canada, and you know what that journey looked like. And if you had said that, we want to celebrate you and your achievements, she would have said, I'm not even going to show up. Right. But because it was more about, we want to get everyone together. She wanted to get people together that had touched her life and meant something to her. And so what I would say is that, we need to, as a community, make that effort to reach out to those people and learn about what they have done and what they experienced and what the parallels are, and record that. Even if there is some kind of project that looks at those things, as a legacy award. People in Ottawa are doing that now. They're looking even, posthumously trying to get her that recognition. Not that she would have wanted that. Like, I really want to be clear about this, because I want to be sincere to Auntie's wishes. And Auntie would have wished to just go quietly and for her to receive it in Al-Akhirah. And inshallah, she will, inshallah. But at the same time, I get what you're saying. And so I think somebody, or someone does need to sort of showcase and especially given what Baraa said. You spoke really well, Baraa, about how this inspired you, right? And so that's the piece that, if this inspires other people to unapologetically continue with what they see are needs, and to do them as visible Muslims, or not even as visible Muslims, then that needs to happen. And so that's the benefit of that. So if someone wants to take it on, it's a great idea.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we're going to have to end here. There's so much we could have talked about, and we can go on and on, of course, as you would know better about her life and legacy. But at this point, we're going to have to end. So thank you so much, Dr. Aisha, and also Baraa, for being here, Dr. Aisha Sherazi, Baraa. You both have done an amazing job of really showcasing from various different perspectives, given your position and your generation, and your experiences. So thank you so much. Really, really makes a difference. Something that I learned so much from, and I hope others will be inspired as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, well, thank you, folks, for tuning in today. This was an episode dedicated to the life and legacy of a pioneer who has been so humble, as you have learned, and who was a great community builder, who was a great listener, who was a person who empowered women and youth and men even through her incredible positive energy. And through her focus on serving God and serving humanity. So there's so much we can benefit from her life and legacy. And I really hope that you and I can keep building on her legacy. Her family's wish was for you to keep, if you want to donate something or contribute, do so to the Children's Aid Society, because that's where she was as one of the board members. And there's so many other wonderful institutions she was, of course, affiliated with. So feel free to reach out and contribute whatever you can in her memory. Once again, we are listening to Taha Ghayoor on Canada Today, and we look forward to seeing you again on this show. We want to thank Dawanet and TorontoMuslims.com for the marketing partnership, and our wonderful producers, Aisha Malik, as well as Saliha Farouk. Once again, thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.